Okay, I have 9 pages of notes here on vitamin D. We're never going to make it through all that. So, the way we structured it, and worked fairly well this morning, was that we went, let me go for half an hour, and then make me stop and turn you loose for questions, because your questions are going to hit the key points anyway of, of what's going on. First off, let me tell you my story in terms of how I got really interested in this vitamin D issue. It was back in the early 90s that I sustained yet another whiplash injury that really did me a great deal of damage. And it progressed, it incapacitated me at the time, but it just kept going and going and going. After a while, they told me that I had fibromyalgia. After a few years, I found a book about post-traumatic fibromyalgia, written by a physician who had himself suffered this particular scenario. And it fit me to a T. Didn't make me better, but it gave me some understanding of what was going on, because the pain is all over and forever. And I was going to various doctors trying to see what could happen that might help me. And I remember one guy asked me, he says, "Now where do you hurt?" I says, "I'll tell you what.
Where don't you hurt?"
It's easier for me to tell you where I don't hurt. The tip of my nose does not hurt, and my earlobes don't hurt, and all the rest of me does." And that was a truth. When I moved from Arkansas over here, in the early 2000s, I worked sometimes over at Wildwood, and I got to meet Dr. Grievous, came to a astounding degree of professional respect for him. I went to him about something else, and in the course of our doctor's visit, he said, let's check you for a vitamin D level. I says, "Oh, no, you don't really need to do that." It was late July, early August. I've been out in the sun every day working in the garden. I have not been sunshine deprived. It's not necessary. And he, being a gentleman, backed off. A few months later, I went to another physician who was checking me for something else, and that physician didn't ask me if I wanted a D level. Just ordered a whole batch of blood work done, including that D level. And when it came back, I was deficient. And we started working on it. It was to my surprise, but I was deficient. And more surprising was that as my vitamin D level came up into a normal range, my pain level came down. Very interesting indeed. So instead of having pain that was so challenging it was difficult for me to get out of bed in the morning, I was having pain, but I could get on with living. If it's only a low-grade pain, you can pretend it's not there and distract yourself and go on with life, And I thought that was really a good idea. And I was going pretty good. Well, then I went down to see Dr. DeBarge, the eye doctor, and he saw my cataracts, which the gentleman you noticed was able to see rather clearly. And he says, "Well, we think we better get going on you're not ready for surgery yet. Let's add in the omega-3. That's kind of interesting. So I went home and I added in the omega-3 with flaxseed, which I get at the VM, and grind my own because that's the cheapest way. And then I went and I got some of the ARADS formula, and I don't know if you've heard of ARADS. That's an eye study that was pretty big, and ARADS 2 is currently going on now. And of course, when you're into eye vitamins, it's a high A. high vitamin A. And the further I went on that, I was able to notice an improvement in my eyes, and my pain was coming back. That was not exactly what I had in mind. And I didn't understand, and I kept going and going until finally I came across Dr. John McConnell and the Vitamin D Council on the web. And he reported a major study out of England in 2008 that says vitamin A competes with vitamin D for the cellular receptors called VDR on the cellular level. And he said, from that study, they found that vitamin A, when it's competing, will win. It seems to be the tougher of the two guys. It kicks the D to the side and hogs the receptors. Yeah, just kind of interesting.
Yeah, because we have a combination A and D, so I wonder.
Well, and in the old days, see, that was cod liver oil. Your A and D were together. I do not know the truth of that, but I started splitting so that I take my iVites in the morning and I take my vitamin D at bedtime. Now, the interesting thing on that, this is not research, but 3 of my customers from 3 different states, they don't know each other, have told me that by taking their vitamin D at bedtime, they're getting a better night's sleep. Now, I don't know, that's not in the research, okay?
I'm going to try.
In the meantime, Dr. Grievous was beginning to talk about vitamin D, and he came to camp meeting and talked about that. And the basis of my notes here are his notes. And Dr. Grievous has let me write with him. We've been published in Renewed and Ready and in Vibrant Life and in Women of Spirit. What he says to me is, Bonnie, you just write so folksy. And I says, Doctor, you talk over everybody's head, even mine. We're a good team together, and he lets me write for him. So I translate what he has to say into English so that most people can understand. Vitamin D, first off, so that we understand where we're going, is not a vitamin.
It's not a what?
It is not a vitamin.
Oh, vitamin D is not a vitamin.
No.
Vitamin D is not a vitamin.
No. It was named that when we first discovered it. But in truth, it is not a vitamin. It is a hormone. Now, hormones are a whole nother bag of beans. And hormones are tricky and need to be handled carefully. So while people are going gung-ho and taking vitamin D as though it was safe, that is a misnomer, and I'm expecting the laws to change sometime soon in the way that it's being handed out, because I think you said you had some 10,000 units over there.
Yeah.
Some products.
People are coming in, they've had to, their doctor said 50,000, they've been taking 50,000.
Yeah. And we've got to come back to the D2 versus D3 issue as well, because they're not the same, nor are the dosages the same. So, in the old days, doctors felt that in order to be normal for your vitamin D level, and a blood level was between 20 and 100. The last research that we saw, which is quoted in this article, he pretty well demonstrated that below a blood level of 40, you will run into issues of vitamin D deficiency, and above the level of 60, you will run into a whole scenario of problems. Below, every disease process, it seems, will get worse, and you will have an increased risk of every illness and death. Above 60, you have an increase of atherosclerosis formation, cardiovascular disease, kidney stones, heart attack and stroke, and death. And for you to be safe and healthy, you need to be in this 40 to 60 range. When they did a research on young men who were lifeguards out on the ocean front in the sun all day long, you know, they checked to see where their blood levels were on D. It was hanging right about at 50. Right about at 50 after the summer. Now, when you get your vitamin D by sunshine, you will never overdose. God has put some phenomenal mechanisms in that will turn off the conversion. But when you take it orally or injectable, you can definitely overdose. So when I asked Dr. Grievous, I said, you know, who should be tested for vitamin D deficiency? He says everyone, particularly this time of year. And then a doctor should be involved in terms of trying to get the blood work done and trying to get you in that balanced health range where you're not at an increased risk of death and cardiovascular trouble at the top or death and everything else on the bottom. So you sort of need a doctor. The things that can happen with too low are the hypocalcemia. That's your low blood calcium. And the reason you need blood calcium is because without it your muscles won't work. Your nerves and your muscles won't work. Numbness and tingling, muscle cramps, laryngeal spasm, tetany, and seizures if it is really, really severe. Personally, I have never seen a vitamin D deficiency go into tetany. But it's in the literature, and people can die of it when they go into the laryngeal spasm, when their voice box and airway spasm off, and it kills them. Okay? So that's really, and I've never seen a tetany myself. I've seen a lot of the other stuff. If it is a lesser deficiency, you have muscle weakness, still have the low blood calcium, you go into the secondary hyperparathyroidism, and the interesting thing, another that my customers are telling me, that as they get their vitamin D levels corrected, the ones that had thyroid problems before, they're needing less and less medication as supplementation.
With
you know.
thyroids.
Huh?
People that have the thyroids.
People that are taking thyroids by a pill. If you're taking a thyroid pill, they're finding that when the D supplement is used and the deficiency is corrected, the thyroid problem gets better. I've got one lady that's hoping to go totally all the way off of her thyroid. I don't know whether she's going to make it or not, but she's made a lot of improvement, and that's kind of interesting. With the low vitamin D, you have localized bone pain, you have osteomalacia, osteopenia, osteoporosis, and fractures. There was a real interesting study done in New Zealand where they went into a nursing home and they checked everyone for vitamin D, and they treated and corrected. And the interesting thing was that they had a measurably fewer number of falls and a measurably fewer number of fractures when the D level was corrected, because you're correcting a muscle as well as a bone issue. And that, you know, now I've tried with one of the local nursing homes to get them to do something similar. I have not been successful.
Reasoning?